Thanks, Laura.
I'll miss you guys. And gals, guys and gals.
Jim, I don't know who your IT helper is, but I bet she could have a lot of work right now in this day and age.
Well, she's just trying to help me see if you guys can hear me.
Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay.
You're live, people. Your meeting's live.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the September 23rd mid-month meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Let me pull up our agenda here. The Planning and Zoning Commission will hear public comments only on the items that appear on the agenda this evening. Presentations by the public are limited to no more than 10 minutes. Well, I guess I don't know if this is relevant right now for the main spokesperson, 3 for individuals. And as always, you can send additional comment to the Planning and Zoning Commission in written form. So let's see. Tonight we'll start with the adoption of our September 2nd meetings and include in that the findings of fact for the couple of variances we reviewed at that time.
Motion to approve.
Okay. Second. Great. Okay, we have motion a second, and then I guess we have to go roll call. I'll go with as you're arranged on my screen. Mr. Hauser.
Aye.
Mr. Archibald.
Aye.
Mr. Kuhn.
Aye.
Mr. Edmonds.
Aye.
Ms. Kilgore.
Aye.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Aye.
I think that's everybody. Aye. And then, so that's everybody. Minutes are approved. So now we're going to head into our main event for the evening. And we're going to open up, well, not necessarily open up, but we're going to vote, I guess, open up and vote on a couple of the conditional zonings that we had to recess last time due to our online protocols. A reminder to anybody watching that conditional zonings do go to City Council for final approval. So there will be another hearing after our vote. So public comment has been closed. It was open for 24 hours and now it is closed. But we are looking at the conditional zoning amendment for the JCC at 236 Charlotte Street and 336 Hillside Street. And the planner coordinating the review is, I think it's Ms. Bernstein.
Yes, and she's standing by as well, but now would be the time for the commission to ask any questions or just have discussion or you can proceed to a vote. So there were some kind of questions or a few concerns that were raised at the last meeting. So I don't know if there's more discussion that is needed. Some new information was shared with the commissioners trying to answer some of those questions. Ms. Godsey is available also if you all have more questions.
So I think there were some issues concerning being able to pull out of the driveway entrance and exit and location of some of the utilities and infrastructure. Any further discussion or questions for the applicant?
I have a couple comments. Based on the information that was provided, it appears that turning north on Murdoch is not possible or is difficult, likely to result in a collision with the cars that are parked across the street. I think in order to approve this, I would request that those
Uh-oh. We have a frozen Tony. Well, okay, while we're waiting for Mr. Hauser to rejoin or unfreeze, are there any other questions or comments regarding JCC proposal?
I was going to make a comment. I wonder if it's similar to what Mr. Hauser was going to say in that perhaps I don't know that I want to go stronger than perhaps at least right now. Maybe Mr. Hauser
All
will.
parking spaces be removed so that there is sufficient room for a motor turn.
Oh.
Joe, why don't you go ahead and finish?
Okay.
I was going to make a comment about perhaps we should not make it a right turn only onto Murdoch as opposed to right and left turn. My guess and limited observations of having been through that area are that most people would be right turning anyway and not left turning. But it seems like having it be right turn only would eliminate any conflicts with, because essentially left turn, you would be turning into the oncoming traffic lane with the on-street parking. So it could eliminate some potential issues there that what is not a great intersection now.
Okay. I would say that I think the traffic will be minimal, except maybe at pick up and drop off. And I just get a little nervous trying to, I feel like this is the traffic engineer's job to, and as even though, I think Tony specifically has probably the most knowledge and experience with this, but I just, isn't that what the city is through their review process supposed to make sure that, ideally, and we haven't had any comments from traffic, and usually they don't hold back, and they're what are some other things that could help? Could the big ugly mirrors you put up so you can see around? I don't know.
Can you hear me?
Hi, welcome
Can you
back.
hear me?
Yes.
The problem, the communication that Ms. Godsey had with Mr. Seabour at the city, he suggested that there are cases like this in the city, or he stated that there are cases like this in the city, and that they have removed parallel parking across the way in order to provide sufficient space for a single smooth movement of the vehicle out of the space. I understand that the primary time that this occurs is in two periods, pick up and drop off, but those are also key traffic periods. Where other people that use this are going to be frustrated by it. And for somebody to pull out of that driveway to make a left turn and have to stop and then back up and then continue their turn is going to make people unhappy, just as the prospect of any other development that causes traffic makes people unhappy. So I think that if we can pursue, and I don't believe that a right turn only will work, because there are people that are going to ignore the sign. They're going to try to make that left turn anyway. I think that if you can eliminate the space across the street that allows that turn to be made, or revise the geometry of the driveway so that the turn can be made within the space available, it makes sense. Otherwise, it creates one more item in somebody's drive in the morning that's going to make them angry and further create traffic problems in the city of Asheville.
So with Mr. Hauser's suggestion, it sounds like the applicant wouldn't be able to get rid of it. It would be incumbent upon the city to make that modification. So how would we?
We can, we can certainly communicate that to the transportation staff and our public works staff and see what they think. As far as making it a condition of this project, the applicant doesn't have any control over that. So I think we would have to get it approved by the city, but we could certainly ask them to look at that and see if that would, if they felt like that was appropriate.
Well,
I might not be as adamant about this if my car had not been hit in exactly this same situation, not at this location, but in the exact same situation. So I know it happens. And I know that Mr. Seabour's comments about the turning analyses programs being conservative, and that's true, but nevertheless, the analysis that was done shows that the car is either being hit or is very close to being hit. So I can't approve it the way that, or I can't vote in favor of it the way it's shaken out right now.
Well, and the reason why I suggested the right turn is having lived in the apartments, not exactly directly across the street, but right there on Murdoch. I'm not in favor of any plan that would eliminate any on-street parking there. To me, that is needed for that, and it also helps to slow the traffic there. That's a bad intersection. And actually, the morning after our last meeting, I almost got hit riding my bike there by someone who failed to stop at the two cars in a row that failed to stop at the stop sign at Murdoch. So there's a lot of traffic there that, something needs to be done. And it seems like it would be possible to say a condition would be that it's right turn only, and we can't condition removing a parking spot. So
I if I may, when I was looking at those turning radii from the driveway, I concur. There are a lot of parking spaces, and that very narrow street. People obviously use those spaces, and I am concerned about the left-hand turn. And if there's some way we could just limit it to right-hand turns without eliminating spaces, I think the neighborhood may be a little bit more appreciative. And it's just a tight, difficult space to do. But I concur that the right only would be a more logical and more manageable solve for this problem.
And with these kinds of conditions, the applicant has to agree to them. So I'm wondering if the applicant is receptive to restricting the movement out of that driveway to a right turn only.
Yes, Mrs. Tuck, this is Suzanne Godsey with Sightwork Studios. Good evening, everybody. Listening to all the comments. I've been in communication with the architect, texting. We would be okay with a right turn only. That would be fine. And we understand the issues in regards to these small tight streets with on-street parking. All of those drives that exit out onto Murdoch back into on-street parking, and they're, reversing into cars. So we feel like pulling out, or at least have the advantage of seeing the cars as you are pulling out instead of backing out. We did take a look at some opportunities in terms of we are permitted to completely remove parking on this site and just cut off the curb cuts and just be done. And we wouldn't have to do a handicap parking space. We wouldn't have any queuing. We wouldn't have any off-street, stacking. The plan that we're showing is making as much of lemonade out of lemons with the existing site conditions that we have. We're providing 9 queuing spaces on the site. That's nothing to sneeze at. So we felt like this would be the best for the neighborhood. And just with the site constraints, and the road width and all the other items that I'm sure you've seen as you've been taking a look at the site plan, this was the best alternative that we could come up with. And I don't know if I said it to begin with, but yes, we did confirm that a right out would be fine. I don't know if that alleviates some of the no votes, but at this point, we have exhausted every alternative for this site in terms of providing adequate circulation, stacking, and getting children off street. So,
and just to add, this is Mike Mitchell from Edgerton Architecture. Just adding to Suzanne's comments, it's this improvement to the site and the building is meant to help accessibility, to improve security, to just overall trying to alleviate the pressure on the neighborhood from the parking. And we feel that while it is, I know the right turn only would definitely work. It's just, we feel like people coming out of that parking area are going to be careful because they're going to be coming uphill into that turn, and if it's a right turn only, they'll look and they'll turn and they'll be right there. The traffic typically does kind of slow down for that particular stoplight because most people turn left or right at that stoplight, and it's right at a light, so people are going to be slowing down going into that intersection. So I think it's a really good solution.
So yeah, and it's a stop sign, not a traffic light, but minor detail. I would say that having been participated in JCC drop off before, it's really frustrating when people pull their cars over in the middle of hillside and they're getting kids out of car seats. So while I understand that this is not a perfect solution, I do think it's better than what currently happens. And it's especially if you do a right turn, once you get to hillside, you easily could go left or right to Charlotte Street or Merriman. So I think that, I think that's a workable solution. But I can't tell you how many times you see people trying to go around a stopped car because there's someone pulling, out of their car, taking a child out of a car seat. So I'm in favor of queuing them in any way we can in dealing with our narrow little roads. So,
and I would just like to say real quick, I do appreciate the work that Site Work has done and Ledgerton has done. I mean, I think it is, I do appreciate that. I'm not against what you have done in trying to get that drop off the street. It's very good. And again, it's the whole idea of the right turn is how can we make it just that little bit better so that it's the best that we can do in the situation.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Okay, let's go ahead then and see if I'll go ahead and make a motion. I will move to approve the conditional zoning amendment request to the properties located at 236 Charlotte Street and 336 Hillside Street, Zone CB2CZ, for the expansion and improvements as shown on site plans, and find that the request is reasonable. It is in the public interest, consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, and meets the development needs of the community, in that the future land use of the Living Asheville Comprehensive Plan anticipates non-residential community-focused uses, and the amendment allows for needed upgrades and access management to a site while maintaining compatibility with the surrounding area. And we want to just also make clear that in the B1 conditions, we will include a right turn only out of the exit onto Murdoch.
I will second that.
All right. Let's see. Well, I guess we'll do the roll call. All those in favor. Ms. Kilgore?
Aye.
Mr. Hauser?
Nay.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Aye.
Mr. Archibald?
Aye.
Mr. Edmonds?
Aye.
Mr. Kuhn?
Aye.
Aye for myself. So the motion passes 6-1. And now it does go on to City Council for the final determination.
And that date is tentatively scheduled for October 13th.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you, everybody. All right, next group of people. We have them up.
That would be Mr. Crawford. I'm not sure the meeting invitation was shared, but I'm not sure if he's joined or not.
And I just need to state again that I will be recusing myself from this vote due to my prior involvement.
And we already voted to recuse you last time, so I'm assuming that still stands.
Yes.
We're just reopening, right? Okay, do we, I guess we could still discuss and vote even if the applicant is not present.
Yes.
Okay. So we will, okay, next on the agenda is a conditional zoning for the DIY tiny homes, reopening the hearing for 11 and 22 Burleson Road.
We're not reopening the hearing.
We're not, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So we're just moving into
voting.
deliberation and vote. Yeah.
Okay. And there was some additional information shared, I think.
I think for this project, there's no additional information.
Okay. All right. Well, is there any discussion from what we looked at last? Do we need to bring it up on the screen?
I can, but just to remind the commission, it was 2 parcels out off of East Tunnel Road, or Tunnel Road. Burleson Road is the name of the road. And there were 15 proposed tiny homes with the project, and it also included the improvements to the right-of-way. And I'll try to get that open for you.
And Mr. Crawford has joined us. Hello.
There he is.
Topograph for you.
I'm sorry?
I believe I sent you, and I do have and can share here the topographical survey that was made.
Correct. So we'll we'll get that all up in just a second. And that's right, because we did want to see a little bit how topography affected your site. So great.
Drew, are you pulling up that topographic survey?
I can move towards that. I did send it via email to you and Ms. Hudson, and so I hope that you also have it.
Oh, let me check.
And I will be pulling it up here shortly myself.
Mr. Crawford, may I ask a question, Laura?
Yes.
While we're waiting to pull all this stuff up?
Absolutely.
Is it my understanding that these units will be sold sort of in a way like a condominium, so they share common elements, and then each unit will be sold individually, or will this be rental property? I just wanted to make sure I understood.
It will initially be rental property, but we wanted to make sure that in the future we had the opportunity to make these available for sale. And so the technical term is the Planned Community Act, but generally people think of it as a townhome development where each home will be on its own individual parcel.
Thank you for that.
Certainly.
Drew, I don't have permission to access that document.
Certainly. If y'all will continue with questions, Adobe is forcing a restart right now. Any other questions, or I think I have it up if I can do present.
Let's go ahead and see what you got here. Can we just review the conditions perhaps? Does someone have those they can pull up?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now.
Are you able to see the screen?
Yeah.
And hopefully you're seeing the topo map.
Okay. So those are 5-foot topos?
10 foot.
Yeah, 10-foot topos. Okay.
Well, the orange is 10 feet.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. The major orange lines are 10 feet. So fundamentally, the slope of the road from approximately the end of this concrete curb on the adjacent property to the top of the hill, which crests right along the property lines, is a 15-degree slope road between those 2 points.
Okay.
And if I recall correctly, I think part of the discussion was may have also been about why there were so many driveways, and it's because essentially this property is stepping up.
Exactly. Because when you look at it in plan, initially you think, why can't you just share more driveways? But it's because each one is
at a different
level.
Yeah.
And what you'll see where we do have some shared driveways towards the top and the bottom is where we've been able to mitigate the slope to do a little bit of shared driveway work.
Okay.
And I can switch to the site plan easily if someone would like that.
Okay, that'd be great.
All right. Did that switch to the site plan for you?
Yeah.
Good.
Excellent.
And then you are putting the turnaround at the end for fire access.
Correct. And just for reference, we've rotated 90 degrees between the site plan and the topo.
And forgive me if we discussed this last time, but how do you handle trash and recycling for a project like this?
Certainly. That's actually one of the questions that is still a little bit under consideration. The established rules by the city of Asheville is that each single family home will pay the $14 per month for its own recycling, its own trash. We've gathered permission to have common trash platforms. We are asking for a ratio of 5-to-1. So we would end up having 4 platforms that would share trash and recycling in common locations. And one of our asks through HCD is that we actually only be charged for the trash and recycling that we utilize, as opposed to each individual home being charged the fee.
It would be pretty amazing if each tiny home could fill up their own trash can every week. So,
but it will be municipal service, so it will be your standard rollout bins,
right? Okay.
Just maybe perhaps fewer in a common
fewer
area.
of them. Okay, that makes sense.
So you'll hear me speak about ratio of rooms or bedrooms to cans as opposed to homes to cans.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. And then one of my only thoughts looking at this was there are much more stringent planting requirements typically for developments like this. So if you look at the Plan South, there is no planting really on that side. And was that taken into consideration?
The south would be this border through here, and
Plan South, meaning at the bottom of the page.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry.
I appreciate that. Plan South is actually a wooded area already between my property and the Holiday Inn. And so it's not shown on here, but there are trees along this property line already.
Okay.
So it's the only buffer that would be required for this project is actually on the north end, which would be the left side by the turnaround. Mm-hmm. And the commission may recall there was some discussion about that. That's actually one of the conditions that we wouldn't have a buffer, because Mr. Crawford had been communicating with the residents that are at the further down on Burleson Road that they preferred having the vegetation that is shown on the plan to help eclipse the view of the new hotel that's being constructed.
Okay. Are there any other further questions for Mr. Crawford? Or any discussion regarding this plan?
I have a question for staff.
Yes.
What are the city standards for a low impact road?
It's a 32-foot right of way with a 20-foot paved surface. And then depending on the conditions, the stormwater conditions or what the infrastructure is available in the area, it could include a stand-up curb, but oftentimes it's just stormwater is managed with ditches.
So in this case, you're going to require a minimum 24-foot wide right of way instead of the 32.
Yeah.
But what as-built standards are required?
It's the 20-foot paved surface, and there's a certain amount of subgrade, compacted subgrade, that's also required for the road. So
is it the full 8 inches?
Yeah. Okay. It's the full. Okay. It has to be able to hold that trash truck that's coming down, or an emergency vehicle.
My other question is the 2 short-term rentals. Was that provided to be able to justify this as being a lodging expansion zoning?
It did factor into choosing the appropriate zoning designation. So we had to find a zoning designation that would allow short-term rentals and multifamily units. And so this is the only zoning designation that would allow those two.
And the short-term rentals, are they under 30 days?
Yes.
But there's no requirement that those short-term rentals be short-term rentals. Is that correct?
Correct. They could become long-term should they so choose.
My only issue, and I brought it up last time, is I think this is like trying to put a square peg in a round hole in it. If this is something that we're going to begin to see, I don't think we want lodging expansion districts all around the city. And I really think that this ought to have a little bit further thought as to how this can be incorporated into our UDO.
We're working on it.
It is interesting. I just see something like this. This is outside of the current standards, and it's always hard to be the first. And so I appreciate Mr. Crawford has come to us through multiple channels. And I do think the conditional zoning is appropriate for us to look at this as a, it's a little microcosm, this is a little test of your concept. And so now if we zone this, even though, as Mr. Kuhn was saying, this will have a lodging expansion, it will only be the 2 units that would be allowed for any kind of short-term rental activity.
That's correct. A maximum of 2.
Right. And that can't change.
Correct.
Okay. And what about street lighting, or how is that handled on something like this?
You don't have to have street lighting. If they so choose to have street lighting, they would have to meet the city standard for that lighting.
Okay.
Mr. Kuhn, if you're familiar with the cottage development rules that the city has in place, that is what we were utilizing as our model for how to think about what we were doing. And on street lighting, we have leaned away from having overhead street lighting and are going to utilize the exemptions that are made for low voltage LED at ground level lighting, is from a design standpoint where we're at.
Got it. Okay, any other further questions or discussion? All right. I move to approve the conditional zoning request for the property located at 11 and 22 Burleson Road from highway business to lodging expansion conditional zone with an amendment to the future land use map of the Living Asheville Comprehensive Plan from neighborhood residential to urban corridor, and find the request is reasonable in the public interest, is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, and meets the development needs of the community. In that the request provides growth in targeted areas that are strategically located, increases the diversity of the city's housing supply, provides affordable housing units, and the proposed change to the future land use of the Living Asheville Comprehensive Plan better aligns with the use of the property.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. We'll go through our roll call. Mr. Rodriguez?
Aye.
Mr. Kuhn?
No.
Mr. Edmonds?
Aye.
Mr. Hauser?
Aye.
Mr. Archibald?
Oh, he was recused.
Oh, you're right. I'm so sorry. And Ms. Kilgore?
Aye.
And I'm going to vote in favor. So the motion passes 5-1. And that means you are now on to City Council for final review.
Thank you all.
All right. Thank you. Okay. So now we're going to take a look at zoning text amendments, known as 160D, the update to the historic resources, and the update to the enforcement and definitions. Would you mind giving us a short recap, Ms. Tuck?
Sure. So in 2019, the state of North Carolina passed a session law, I think it's 2019-111, that consolidates, clarifies, and organizes all of the land use laws of the state. And this was a collaborative effort between the School of Government, the legislature, and land use attorneys across the state. And so municipalities have a certain amount of time to update their ordinances to be consistent with 160D. And so these are the first 2 amendments that staff have worked on to try to bring our ordinance into alignment. There's a lot of stuff in 160D that isn't represented in our ordinance, but where it is, we have to make sure we're consistent. So it's largely, an administrative task.
Yes. Okay, are there any questions regarding the text amendments?
I'm happy to make a motion if there aren't.
Go for it.
Joe, go ahead and I'll second it, whatever.
I move to approve the proposed wording amendments to Chapter 7, Articles 3, 4, 5, 8, and 14, I think. Yes. And of the UDO, and find that the proposed amendments are reasonable in the public interest and consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, and that they promote responsible growth based on holistic decision-making and bring city ordinances into compliance with the new North Carolina General Statute regarding land use development, Chapter 160.
And I will second that.
Okay, motion and a second. Mr. Hauser?
Aye.
Mr. Edmonds?
Aye.
Mr. Kuhn?
Aye.
Right, Mr. Rodriguez?
Aye.
Right, Ms. Kilgore?
Aye.
Mr. Archibald?
Aye.
I'll give it an aye. That means it passes unanimously and moves on to City Council.
And then there was the second amendment, same origin.
We need to vote it.
Sorry. Yeah.
And do a vote for that one as well separately.
Yeah. Because it's different articles. It's
Mr. Hauser.
Aye.
Mr. Edmonds.
Aye.
Mr. Kuhn.
Aye.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Aye.
Ms. Kilgore.
Aye.
Mr. Archibald.
Aye.
I'll vote aye. And so again, motion passes unanimously, goes on to City Council. Okay, so back to our agenda. That concludes the unfinished business that we were actually going to vote on tonight. But we will be reopening the hearing, which is concerning the zoning text amendment for hotel development standards and the rezoning, including the hotel overlay district for discussion.
And just
because, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to add to that this was, we had a public hearing held, like the other items that you voted on. The public hearing just sort of automatically closes 24 hours after the meeting ended. But we now have more time in our timeline to review and consider these changes. And so it was recommended that we consider reopening the public hearing just to allow new information to be presented, to allow additional public comment, should people be interested. And we will be able to discuss this also at the October meeting. So I would recommend at the end of this just to continue the public hearing again to October, just to allow one more bite at the apple, so to speak. But yes, so as you said, you could move to reopen the public hearing. Okay,
so I guess we have to take a motion. All those in favor of reopening the public hearing, that makes sense, to discuss the hotel amendment, can we just raise your hand? Aye.
It looks like we have unanimous support.
Unanimous consent to open the public hearing. All right, so would we like to start with, I think, is Stacy Merton on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, welcome.
Hi.
I know you sent an update to the design review. Can you just give us a little, I guess, and this is, you've been talking to some other commissions, I guess, concerning some of this. Would you like to go ahead and give us a little update where we stand?
Yes, I would. And I actually have a little shortened version of the presentation I gave last time to kind of reorient everybody. I know when a few weeks have gone by that sometimes we forget what happened. So let me just see if I can real quickly try to present this. Can everyone see my screen? Does everyone see?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Alrighty. So I just kind of wanted to reorient everyone to where we kind of left off. Well, not so much where we left off, but kind of update you on where we are with everything. As I think everybody knows that the council did approve the 5-month moratorium extension at their council meeting last evening, and they have asked for a council work session on October the 13th. They have asked also that the P&Z not vote until after that council work session. So tentatively, we have November the 4th for the P&Z vote, and then it will go on to council consideration in later, probably not until January. And I wanted to remind everyone that council gave direction for this project based on the ULI recommendations. And these were the 3 items that they asked us to look at. So reestablishing hotels as a permitted use, incentivizing public benefits, and identifying design improvements. There have been some comments about the extent of what we're working on from some of the other boards and commissions, which I will go over, but I just wanted to reemphasize that these were the items that council had asked us to look at. And so you'll remember that we developed this proposal that includes these kind of 3 legs of a stool, so to speak: the overlay standards, the public benefits table, and the design review. And we will get into a little bit more of the specifics of these. I don't think we had really an opportunity last time. It was such a late hour as well. So there'll be opportunity tonight to delve into those and for you to ask additional questions. Just wanted to remind everybody that this is an incentive-based approach. A hotel project would be a level 2 review, provided all the regulatory requirements are met, the public benefits are met, and that there would be compliance with the design review board. With still the opportunity for council review as a CZ if necessary. And again, just the process flow, this just sort of outlines that flow. If it's within the overlay district and meets all the requirements, the project could possibly be approved, but there's always that out at any step along the way for council review. We did make a number of revisions already based on the public engagement process. And we are continuing to do that. And now that we have an extension of the moratorium, we'll continue to take public comment through the boards and commission meetings and continue to refine the proposal. And so some of the things that we are looking at based on comments that we've received just in the past few weeks, we've had requests for map amendments for the River Ridge shopping center on the east side of town, also in the River Arts District. We're looking at maybe pulling back a little bit in that area based on concerns from the RADBA folks. And we've also had a request for some adjustments in the downtown area. So we'll continue to be looking at those in more detail. And Laura, as you said, we have, I did share with you some amendments that we're proposing for the design review board, and we'll get into a little bit more detail on that. And also we're looking at possibly a threshold based on room count that would actually trigger a council review that would be similar to what a level 3 project that it would be based on the room count, but it would be related to the size of a hotel being approximately 100,000 square feet. And then we're also looking at some alternatives to limit excessive clustering hotels because we've heard concerns from the community about that. Wanted to remind folks about the goals with the map and the things that we looked at when we created the map. First, we started with the future land use map of Living Asheville, but then we also looked at available infrastructure, highway and transit access, proximity to existing tourist destinations, and also existing hotel clusters. We're trying to protect neighborhoods that are vulnerable to gentrification, and also just make sure that we're keeping hotel development away from neighborhoods so that quality of life can be preserved in our communities. We are interested in encouraging historic preservation and also protecting viewshed corridors. So the first thing that I would like to do, if everyone is okay with, is actually show the map and talk about that a little bit more. Does that sound good to everybody? on my screen, I'm on my little Chromebook, so I can't see everyone in my screen at the same time. So does this sound, are you ready to kind of look at the map?
I think that's a great idea to start with the map.
Okay, all right. So hopefully we'll open here. Okay, so, and I can zoom in if you have any questions, but I guess this out here, this is the River Ridge area where we had a public comment about that particular shopping center, the River Ridge Shopping Center sort of acts more like a local community shopping area, even though it sort of appears to be, because it's on the interstate. It doesn't maybe typically fall into the category that from a bigger perspective versus what it appears to from the local community. So we're definitely amenable to looking at that and maybe pulling back a little bit in that area. We haven't had a chance really to delve into that a whole lot yet, but that's certainly something that we would want to look at. I think another area is the south along Lyman Street. We feel like the form code, the River Arts District form-based code would help to limit the size of hotels, but along that southern edge, heights can go up to 5 stories and then even up to 7 stories if there's affordable component as part of that. So we really think that we might want to pull back a little bit there as well. And I think there was a comment too about downtown.
About height.
I'm not sure if you have the map open. I can only see the presentation. I don't know if anyone else can see
really?
the
Okay.
interactive map.
Okay. Let me see.
I know we did get some feedback that some people think we should limit the height of downtown. I'm not quite sure what that does necessarily. I mean, I think the place for our taller buildings, we allow, I think by right, up to 200 feet right now. Is that correct? Downtown? And what is the difference between the typology between hotel, office, or multifamily as far as building mass goes? You know what I'm saying? I don't know if there's a reason why. I mean, because sometimes these buildings are mixed use. I mean, so it could have multiple components. So I'm just not sure why we would want to limit heights downtown.
Well, I think that there was just a concern about hotels in general downtown. I mean, just the proliferation of them and the design. So the staff felt that by limiting the height, that could just draw things in a little bit.
It's not that they're limited to 100 feet. It's just that if you're over 100 feet, you have council review.
Okay, I guess that's fine. I guess to me, that's an arbitrary. I don't think you'll get better or fewer hotels by just saying they can't be over 100 feet, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying. And I know that there were some additional comments. I'm going to stop presenting for just a minute. I wonder if, I'm sorry that you're not seeing the map, and I'm really sorry because I've had this sort of glitch that just happened in the past day with my whole setup here. So
maybe Vidila can.
Vidila, could you present the map?
Sure.
And while Vidila's working on that, Laura, I'll just say that one of the reasons we considered the 100-foot, for a by right hotel in the downtown is that some of the public comment we received expressed a lot of concern about not just about controlling mass of the buildings, but about the skyline and protecting views. There's one hotel in particular that a lot of people kind of pointed out as having eclipsed, this very perfect view of the downtown and the mountains beyond. And, so I think it was just really out of a desire to try to make sure that could be looked at more carefully.
And I understand that, but is the view, is it less eclipsed if the building isn't a hotel? You know what I'm saying? A tall building is a tall building. It doesn't matter what's in it. If that's what we're talking about, if we're having a discussion about what is the height of downtown, which I think it should be high. I mean, I think we should, we don't have the economic base to build tall buildings necessarily in Nashville.
Right.
So.
And I
Just to
agree. I
clarify-
understand the concern that, why would we treat a hotel different than an other use? But I guess, again, because we know that the public really does have this aversion to hotels and design has come up over and over again, that it was a way to pull back a little bit and to push that for that council.
I also just wanted to double check that. So like right now, the standard is any hotel, not any building over 100 feet goes to city council anyway.
Okay, well then that makes sense.
Yeah.
Tall buildings that will affect the skyline are all treated equally, no matter what's inside of them.
Exactly. So why make hotels any different? We didn't want to give them a pass when nobody else got one.
Thank you for that clarification, Shannon. Are there
I'm
any other?
I'm not sure too, just to clarify, maybe Vidila can speak to this briefly about what the typical hotel heights are in downtown. I think we have probably very few hotels that actually do exceed that 100-foot height limit.
I don't have that data in front of me. I know we did some analysis and showed that some of them are taller than that, but the bulk of them aren't. Just to Laura's point, the regulations downtown are the intermediate height zone is 145 feet and the tallest height zone is 265 feet. So you should be looking at the map now. Stacy, if you want to talk it through, I'll just guide it to wherever you want to discuss.
Thank you. I was mentioning along the River Arts District and the south part along Lyman Street, where we did have a little bit of concern based on the RADBA comments. Well, the River Arts folks, they did a survey themselves and they shared with us the comments. And there is just a concern about just proliferation of hotels. And so like we did with the downtown, and we did pull back the blue areas in our sort of first iteration of amending the map. But I thought that it might be worth, and the staff, we've talked about it a little bit more, and we talked about it with the River Arts Commission as well. The Riverfront Redevelopment Commission as well. But because the form-based code, the river, it's actually the RAD River area, would allow up to 5 stories and possibly up to 7 stories. Again, this kind of relates back to the discussion we were just having about downtown. Is it height? But I think for the river folks, that is an issue with them about hotels just being really tall and being just overwhelming the River Arts District.
What is the tallest height limit allowed in the River District currently?
It depends on the form code, and that's what I'm saying. Most of the areas only allow like four stories, but in that river RAD River Zone, which is along Lyman Street, it allows up to 5, and then plus a bonus up to 7 stories if there's an affordable component. So that's where. I guess the staff was thinking that pulling back a little bit on that, maybe just a couple of parcels on that south side would help to alleviate some of their concerns there. That's one thought. And then the other area was the River Ridge Shopping Center area. Vidila, if you want to scan over to that.
I'd like to mention something real quick. I just posted a link to a study or a report that just came out from UNC today or yesterday. And, when we started talking about hotels, we lived in a different world and things have changed a lot since then. So it's good to reopen this discussion because I think there is probably going to be a lot of commercial property that is no longer required for office space because people have figured out that they can work from home. And so allowing existing commercial space to be redesigned in other ways is going to be key to the success of communities, especially downtowns and areas that have a lot of office space. We already saw the reduction in the development over off McDowell Street where they didn't expect to have the need for commercial space that they once did. So I think we need to take that into consideration. Just as an example, I work for a company, an international company with over 60,000 employees, and we're looking at cutting back our office space in half worldwide. So I think it's key for us to consider the existing spaces around town and how that may play into these decisions about hotels and affordable housing and short-term rentals and things like that.
Okay, thank you. Is there a specific place on the map or a specific area that you think that we might be missing something associated with that comment or concern?
Not yet.
Okay, thank you. So this was the other area that, or at least a part of this area, the River Ridge Shopping Center, that we had a comment from actually Claire Richardson. She suggested that we think of that shopping center as more of like a local shopping center as opposed to more of a regional shopping center, and that maybe we pull back the map in that area. So that's another area that's under consideration.
Stacy, in the similar vein, what are you, if we looked at like the Haywood Road corridor in West Asheville? Mm-hmm.
So this is an area where we decided to not.
Okay. And I think that's important to kind of clarify, because to me, that is a great example of as cities grow and the downtown, I know some people feel like it's not the same Asheville that it was, but what you start to see are these neighborhood kind of nodes grow up like you have in large cities. You know, they become these kind of vital centers and that start to pop up kind of around. And I think West Asheville is the perfect example of one of those. And I love that we're keeping it for Ashevilleans. It is about, you know, I mean, of course, tourists can come visit it, but the great restaurants, but it is really, it's a center of local life.
Right. And that's that is where we pretty much landed in our discussion as well. And Vidila is basically showing, he kind of popped up the very sort of first iteration of the map. We actually put out, at least for public review, the idea of allowing at least small hotels in all of our commercial areas. But overwhelmingly, we heard from the public, as we actually anticipated that we would. But we wanted to get that affirmed, that they really want to see those areas reserved for.
Great.
And so that is more or less what I understand from that comment that this person is asking us to do in this case, is sort of treat it more like the Haywood Road corridor.
Right, right. It's a neighborhood center.
Right.
It provides the, it's your grocery store and everything you go to.
Right, exactly.
And I guess we can continue to refine and whittle this down. The tallest areas for hotels, as we're reviewing, it's downtown, a little bit of South Slope and the River District.
Right. So the blue areas are where large hotels would be allowed. Is that what you're referencing?
No. I thought, okay. So blue would be large.
Right. So blue or
larger than orange.
No. So it's not even about height. It's about size. So the orange are for 7 to 35 rooms.
Got it. Okay.
And then the blue is for above that. Right. And we, and I will talk a little bit more. We can talk about it now, but we are considering maybe putting a cap on like the upper limit at around maybe 110 rooms based on some preliminary analysis that we've done. So, because again, we're getting, and what I mean by that is that would throw it into that level 3.
Right. So there will be a limit to what could go by right. On size would be one of those. And what if we looked at an average of what the size of our current, a lot of these hotels that are built today, Hilton's, Marriott's, that kind of, the model, what is their general? It's around like 60 to 80 rooms. I'm kind of guessing, or what is the?
Yeah, we just did a real quick analysis, and I'm not sure I'm going to remember the stats. Vidila might have it, but I think what was it? The average size was 110, is that right? And it seems
Really, over there that high.
it seems like go ahead.
What we were talking about is in the last 10 years, it looks like approximately 110 rooms is the average size of the hotel.
Right. And some of the really big hotels are way above that though. So I'm trying, is there a specific one that we could like reference? I do have the list here so I can,
so
like the bigger hotels downtown, for example, are the AC has 132 rooms and the A Loft at 115. Okay. So they would be like the bigger ones for downtown. Yeah. But a lot of the other ones downtown fall under that. So, because what we don't want to do is we don't want to push it so that most hotels are having to come to council, because the whole idea of this is to try to kind of hit that spot where we're getting the public benefits, we're getting the design review piece, and that, we're not requiring most hotels to have to go to council. I think that's one of our goals. But at the same time, we don't want to have it be where there's these very large hotels and they're not having council review, and because we know the community won't like that. So, but that's where
I don't think your goal of it not going to council is council's goal.
Well, I'm not gonna speak for council, but I do. Our charge, I guess, has been to sort of fulfill the recommendations of the ULI report, and they did recommend a more transparent process. So that's more predictable as well. So that's where we're really trying to shoot for. So.
Let me ask, on your map, there are areas where there are current hotels that are not listed in blue. Will that make them a non-conforming use, and under what condition? If they needed to rebuild or remodel or something like that, how would that impact their ability to do that?
So Shannon might be able to answer this question better, but my understanding is that it does not affect that. Is that correct, Shannon?
Right. So included in the draft ordinance is actually some revisions to our nonconformities section that would allow, like if there was a total loss, our ordinance today says if there's a total loss and you're nonconforming, you can't reestablish that. That's the structure. However, in this case, or let me back up, sorry. Structures are a little bit more challenging. Uses can always be reestablished. If you're a non-conforming use and you have a total loss, you can rebuild. And non-conforming uses can renovate, they can do certain additions. They can't necessarily add more rooms because that would make it more non-conforming. We don't allow that. But we did add some language to the UDO to kind of make sure that they wouldn't, some of the challenges that our non-conforming structures are running into these days, that wouldn't be a problem. And that would actually apply citywide. It wouldn't just be hotels. It would be all non-conforming uses and structures.
So a resort district, if the Grove Park Inn wanted to add rooms or something like that, I take it that it's not listed as one of the blue areas on the map?
It's in the resort district, though, correct?
Right. So Grove Park Inn's a little bit different because it's in resort, and that is the only place right now, currently in the city, that allows hotels. All right.
So that would continue. That
right.
Not.
And I think the Grove Park Inn, it's not in the blue because we don't want it to grow, because it's surrounded by residential and they have a fair amount of conflict already. We wouldn't want them to add hotel rooms necessarily. They could always do a conditional zoning like anybody else outside the overlay.
Okay.
Just to add a little bit to this discussion about thinking about size of hotel and council review, one thing we were looking at was the average size of hotel rooms. And and it varies depending on the type of hotel you look at, right? Because larger hotels have more amenities, more restaurants, more parking garages, which is all considered part of the gross floor area. So smaller hotels in Asheville have the average square foot to room at more of like the 600 square foot number. But if you look at the larger hotels, like the AC Hotel, that number comes up to 1,500. So looking at 25%, about a quarter of all the hotels in Asheville, more of the recent ones where it's easier to collect the data, the average hotel square foot per room comes to about 700 square feet per room. But in the most recent hotels that are a little bit larger, it comes to about 900 square feet per room. So
including amenities.
Including all amenities, that's right.
I think that's also really interesting. And when we pull up the matrix to begin looking at that again, I would like to talk about a little bit like how do amenities fall in points? Does the hotel offer more than just something that locals could use? A lot of large cities, hotels are also the place for conferences, weddings, all kinds of things that are used.
Are there any more questions about the map?
I don't have a question as much. I want to go back and reference sort of the issue that came up with Fairview Road and how there was a request to keep that on a more in keeping with the residential character. I think the rest of Fairview Road kind of falls into that category of what we're trying to do with Hayward Road. But these two parcels or that area is so built up right now anyway that if you're going to do anything along that road, if we keep it in those two commercial properties, I don't think that's definitely not going to spread. So I just think that if that's going to happen, if that's going to happen along that intersection, it might as well be right there where we already have shopping centers that I kind of disagree that these are just local businesses. There's McDonald's and KFC and all of that stuff. Yeah. So I think my point is I think it's appropriate there.
Well, I think what she was talking about there was its future and its ability to become a neighborhood center. And even though you're right, everything there is something from a chain, and it does seem like a totally logical place. I guess she was advocating we preserve this and encourage more local development to serve as a neighborhood center. And would by not allowing hotels, would that create more opportunity, I guess, for that evolution?
Well, then one solution would be to make this into turn that into an orange where it's maybe lower scale, but I just I don't think this decentivizes or incentivizes recreating a large area like commercial area like this into sort of a local. I just don't see. I can see the link in a sort of kind concept, but if it's going to happen anywhere along that road, I think this is kind of the logical place to put it in. I visit these businesses, but I don't really consider them local. And in the future, it would be nice to have someone come in and develop it. And you never know because development is changing so quickly, especially now. So I don't think that decentivizes.
Well, I think it would dovetail into, I don't know what happened to it, but a long time ago, we were looking at community centers, I believe. I think, Videla, you were working on that. And we were looking at these areas in, I know on Merriman, Tunnel Road.
Right.
Yes, exactly. And we were talking about how to see those transform into less suburban with like parking lots and drive-throughs.
Right.
And so you're right, Guillermo. I think you would have to change the underlying zoning to encourage that different kind of development. And I think there's probably a case, an argument for that.
Well,
I don't know if that's going to come back one day.
I think that brings up a great point, Ms. Hudson. I mean, is that possible to add that to that list of urban centers, Videla, that, you know, is kind of being looked at? And I know that's still, that whole idea is out there still. I keep hoping it's coming.
Mm-hmm. I do too. Every time I, drive by the now out of business Steinmart, I look at all that asphalt and just think potential.
Just
skateboard park now.
Yeah. I would love to see some wonderful new development come in there, but I just wonder if this really, maybe this is not the right.
Sure. It's bigger than.
Look at it.
I understand. I appreciate your comments. I think when it's helpful to have those comments as we kind of look at it a little bit closer, and we'll take that into consideration before we make a decision on what we recommend for that area.
Okay.
If you want to develop those locations like you're speaking Steinmart in those areas, we need to go with a carrot and not a stick.
Or a carrot and a stick. No.
Stacy, there was a question too from Ms. Levi about, it says density blue versus orange on hotel overlay appears to be opposite of form-based code, which has greater density at center of district. And I'm assuming this is referring to our downtown height map, where we've got the 265 height max and the 145 height max. And maybe you could speak just a little bit to some of the criteria we looked at for hotels. That height wasn't necessarily one of the criteria for the location of hotels, but what were some of the other criteria we looked at for like the traditional historic district?
Right.
And
so that's basically, thank you, Todd. That is pretty much not 100% where we landed with the orange, but again, based on an extensive community feedback, we sort of landed on trying to encourage adaptive reuse of historic structures in the downtown and in the River Arts District. And so we have that small area or the area where small hotels will be allowed, conforming more or less to the boundaries of the historic area. Now, realizing that we don't have a local district and that other development could come in and be taller and bigger and not have, knock down historic buildings. I mean, it's not, we realize that could still happen. But specifically for hotels, we're hoping that would not happen and that we wouldn't try to encourage adaptive reuse of the historic buildings and while at the same time that we sort of expanded that core area and made it bigger than it was, we also allowed the size of hotels to go up to at least 35 rooms, because what we heard was that would make it a more viable option for an adaptive reuse. So there are, and then there are a few other small areas, like you can see, the South Slope area, where we also are proposing to just have the smaller hotels.
Stacey, is there it's when you have these large zoning areas, people I think may think that, oh my God, they're going to be filled with hotels. What incentives do we have to keep them apart so they're just not all clustered, what is built into this ordinance to keep that from happening?
So at this point, there's no spacing requirements. We talked about spacing requirements. We talked about some other things that we're actually continuing to look at, especially I think that might work downtown, this idea of, in Charleston, they call it the preponderance of the use along any specific block face, that there would be a maximum block face that would be in a particular use. So we're looking at that. The current ordinance does not have that in it, though. We still do have concerns about creating a situation where there's like a scramble. One hotel goes in, and then if there's a spacing requirement or something that it causes land values to increase and just kind of a rush to develop there. And so we really are a little shy about doing something like that, but we are at least going to still continue doing some research on this other method. But right now we don't have anything like that. And that's another reason I think why since we were trying to use the map to help to limit that by keeping that core area at least limited to small hotels, that even if we do have more hotels in that area, that there at least won't be so many rooms, and it will, it'd be overwhelming downtown with hotels and tourists for that matter. So that's our thinking along those lines.
And one last question: what was the reason to have that 5-foot setback?
There is not. I think that's not applying downtown.
Okay.
Yeah, that only applies in the suburban areas, not downtown.
Thank you.
Okay, should we move on to the kind of the matrix portion of
let's, I think Vidila, since apparently I guess the way I'm presenting, it's not pulling up these kind of links that I have in the slideshow. So Vidila, can you share the table? Thank you.
Do you want to talk it through, Stacy?
Yeah, I'll kind of just introduce it, and then if there's specific questions. So the public benefits table actually does have, it's got 3 categories of rooms, but it also has sort of 2 categories of points. So in the what we call the urban areas, the CBD and the River Arts District, we actually require more points with the different levels of rooms. So you can see here under 35 rooms, 100 points. The mid-range 36 to 80 rooms, 140, and then above 81 and above 180 points. So that would be the maximum, and that would be for the downtown and the River Arts District, where basically there's a higher impact and there's a higher potential for return for the developer. So we believe that they could provide a greater level of public benefit to the community. And then outside of those areas, then we have different point system, which only goes up to 120 for the larger rooms. And then we basically have the point systems are divided between sustainability and equity, community, and other community benefits. We also have a option for negative points if you demolish a historic structure, or if there's actually a loss of a business or a use. And I think I explained last time that we had done some analysis, for example, with the Flatiron building, where because of the number of businesses that would have been displaced as a result of that project, that the project would have had to have gone to city council because they couldn't have regained, even if they did every other benefit, they would not have met the points required for that particular project.
So you're differentiating between adaptive reuse of an abandoned building versus displacing a building that is in use. Okay.
Yeah, with it's based more on the business itself, a housing unit or a business. Right. Yeah.
So residential and business. If you're displacing that, you're going to, you're right. Okay.
We had, that's pretty much, I mean, I'd really like to open it up to questions.
Well, I'd like to ask you a couple about your sustainability, because I think it's an important component. We're going to have to start getting a little more serious about sustainability of buildings, especially. And you're going with LEED certification, which is great, but what if there was a lot of projects were pursuing LEED when there were financial incentives from state and federal government. And right now, most of those have dried up. And so a lot of people say, well, I want to be sustainable, but I don't want to pay for the certification required for LEED. It's kind of tough. So I don't want this to be a reason why people don't make sustainable measures in their designs. Does that make sense? Just because they're not pursuing LEED accreditation. Are there can we break it down? Can we say like you provide a certain percentage of power based on renewable energy, photovoltaics? Are you providing battery station? Can we get to a finer detail?
So we had a lot of discussion about that, and we started out actually with a table that had, kind of a little line items for almost every smaller thing. And and not to say that we couldn't go back to that, but I think, again, where we landed is trying to make this, as easy as possible for folks to use.
I just think you're not going to get any sustainable points. No one's going to go for a full LEED certified building, but I don't want them to not get anything.
Right. I understand. I get that. And like I said, we can certainly reconsider that. The other thing that we did add, though, is this Green Globe certification process, which we learned a little bit more about. And in speaking with some industry experts, it's our understanding that it's a lot easier to get certification for that process. There's a lot more flexibility in that certification process. And we're continuing to work with our contact there to get their input on that. But that's kind of one way that we're trying to alleviate what you're suggesting. And also you'll see that we separated out, like the one Green Globe, which is an easier certificate or easier to get. So that's how we've addressed that concern, but still we had a lot of discussion about that. And I could see us, adding more smaller specific things.
I mean, would it hurt to have, more options, or do you think that does that make the process? Because LEED in itself is similar to this. LEED is built on a matrix, and you go through all of the different sections and you look for ways to comply and how many points you get for this and that. And, that flexibility is nice because it gives you a lot of ways to get to your total points and achieve sort of this.
Right.
Yeah, I think, Laura, I think something else we had considered with having the individual green sort of building standards versus LEED or Green Globes was that how large the table gets and how flexible it is. Which individual like green building benefits would we include, and how many points would we assess to it? Another conversation we had was about the enforcement too. If a building decides to pick 10 different individual LEED building elements, that staff has to be able to enforce this at a later point. With the LEED certification, we also did get a little bit of pushback so far from some designers and developers in the community that feel like the cost of LEED certification can be high. But requiring a certification allows us to be able to better enforce these buildings, because a building, if it's LEED certified, has to maintain that certification over a certain period of time. And a building, if we say just has to meet the minimum requirements of LEED but not go through the certification process, would create the situation where we would have a harder time, I think, enforcing that. But we do think the Green Globe option allows another more affordable certification option to developers.
I'll have to look into that one. I'm not as familiar with it. So, and I understand you allow them to track it, and then you're able to kind of, they verify it, and then you're able to include that in the benefits. So,
it does to kind of key into what you're talking about, Ms. Hudson. Things like solar PV systems or like a car charger, those are fairly easy. It's not like if a developer says they're going to install it, you know, from the city's standpoint, I mean, you're either going to see it or not. And it's not like they're going to put it up for, you know, 3 months and then like take it down in the dark of night, you know, so that might be one, you know, I could see like adding a line in just for a couple of those types of items.
I think you're right. It can't be every single thing. Like we used low VOC paint. Like you're right. No, we're not going to chase that down, but maybe a handful of really impactful, larger moves could be.
Well, and I know even some of the lead stuff gets into like, you know, how close is it to transit or how close is it? I mean, some of those would be fairly easy to assess on an individual line item basis. And it seems like to me, some of the, I know on the, at least on the residential side, you know, there's the getting the things like doing your blower door tests and things like that you have to get for lead, but you can get those done at a cost, and then to get the lead is another cost. Like, is there a way to say, okay, we did this HVAC, whatever it would be, and someone else, a third party certifies that, but we didn't go and pay the extra $2,000 for lead. So that maybe is another, it does get into what you're talking about, Todd, with the, how does the city police it? So.
Yeah, it's just,
I say something about the idea of the a la carte menu that we had earlier, where we had, you know, so photovoltaics and other things. It makes it challenging because then you really need to separate out that you can't allow someone to be LEED certified and to get something from the a la carte menu. So then at that point, the a la carte menu is only really beneficial for anyone looking for just a few points. Like if you need 5 or 10 points, but that's really not the way that this system is developed. We try to make it simple and broad enough that you really need to get clusters of points, and that's the way we went, because we've realized that the simpler you can make the code, a lot of times the more effective it is.
Okay.
So there are a couple of other, we talked about sustainability quite a lot. I'll just chime in here. There's this equity portion that has to do with whether you provide affordable housing, and if basically the different options come to how much you're paying per hotel room into the housing trust fund. We have a living wages option, and B Corp certification, which is sort of a very comprehensive standard that we don't think very few or anybody is going to provide. So we gave it maximum points 160. Same with LEED Platinum. And then transportation benefit is basically providing bus passes to your employees. And then under community, we have a different list here that has to do with either providing a neighborhood improvement. This could be like some funding, $300 per room for some neighborhood betterment, such as sidewalk or a bunch of street trees or something like that. And then you have public art, and then this outdoor public plaza option for the urban locations or structured parking options.
Can I noticed in the Charleston's hotel standards, they also provide, I mean, is it possible in the community, I think, category to say, well, are you providing mixed use? I mean, that would be something I think should be, you know, considered, especially are you providing retail, restaurant, conference room space? Or is it a mixed use project where maybe it's, you know, housing in one level of apartments? I mean, could that be something that works into the matrix somehow?
So downtown, and Shannon, chime in if I'm off here. Downtown, we require that the ground floor has a percentage, I think it's 50%, that's a different use on the street. So we're basically requiring.
So you don't get points for that. That's just.
Right. It's just a standard requirement for downtown, where we expect mixed use to really function and to serve a natural sort of synergy. Outside of downtown, that requirement isn't in place, and I think we might, or someone might question whether we should force something that, you know, if you're having to drive to a site that's on Tunnel Road and is auto-oriented, you know, how much is it really how much does integrating mixed use into that project really a public benefit?
Well, I mean, anytime you're providing some housing, you're diluting, the benefit to tourists, and you're increasing benefit to residents.
I mean, I would say the mixed use thing goes right back to what we were just talking about with River Ridge. I mean, if we said that, they needed to provide mixed, something else on the ground floor, like there's part of the reinvigoration of River Ridge, or what we're talking about with the corridor study on Tunnel Road. I mean, it's all dovetailing together.
I kind of think so. I like that, Joe, because then it's not saying that, like the land lease way that so much retail development works out, and it's very expensive. The only people that can afford those rents and sign 10-year leases, they're big chain companies. So if you were starting, leverage in a sense, there's some hotel, but, could it start to provide smaller retail space, office space, other kinds of things that could be incubators for smaller businesses rather than our big suburban model we have going on now?
I just wanted to clarify that Vidila is correct that we do have a requirement in the draft ordinance for 50% of the street-facing facade to be set apart as occupiable storefronts with their own separate public entrance.
Okay.
But that is only in the CBD and in the form code, the River Arts, Haywood Road, or actually we have to take out Haywood, River Arts form code areas.
I probably would be
so we just need to do we just need to do form code on Tunnel Road.
Or you're suggesting that we add a public benefit that gives points to integrating mixed use into the project, into the hotel.
Yes.
Don't you have that with on the equity one with the affordable housing, Vidila? I know there's like the option 5, the highest point had something about housing. I mean, it's constructing it somewhere.
Right.
I mean, and again, this gets back to the complexity and you've already got that at the maximum point, but like if they make it a mixed use and it's the housing or something is constructed with that building, like it gets the maximum amount of points too,
It's probably very unlikely that any of this housing is going to be part of any hotel that's built. Because
of that one on Broadway.
Well, I was going to say, right there on Broadway, right next to the Masonic Temple.
Okay. Well, not impossible, but we've structured it based on our conversations to not require it to be in the same structure. And it seems that most hoteliers are not housing developers. So the assumption has been that they are going to pay into the housing trust fund and that those funds will help the city to fund projects that provide affordable housing. Or this option 5, we're basically saying that you get 160 points if you provide 10% of the total 10% of the total room numbers that you build. You will also build that number in affordable housing.
But it's interesting. I do know that hotel developers say, well, we don't run apartments, and apartment people say we don't run commercial spaces, but we can kind of encourage them to become, to join forces, to not become so siloed and say, I'm just a hotel developer. Say, well, sorry. Well, then in Asheville, you're going to have to, team up and build something more interesting. So, I mean, I think I'd like to see a mix of uses come in. Even when we do have a hotel, I'd like to see it watered down with other, mixed in with other uses so that we're not getting just,
well, we can add a line for affordable housing integrated into the hotel.
Well, I mean, I think it could be just as a line of mixed use. I'm not saying it has to be the affordable housing, and I agree, Vidila. I mean, it's going to be the rare project, but that rare project is the one that all the residents of the city are going to go, wow, that's the hotel we like. I mean,
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's more than just getting them to contribute to our housing fund. I want them to, we're trying to create a more vital down, urban area. And I think a mix of uses would help. And if we don't push them into combining and stretching outside of their comfort zone, they won't.
And we heard that from the Asheville Area Riverfront Development Commission as well, that they would like to see mixed uses as public benefits table.
Okay.
Are there other questions about the table?
And so when you look at your point system, I know you're, I would say that if we're going to make this by right, we need to set the bar high. Because, I know there are a lot of folks that are frustrated and want no more hotels built. And or they want them all to go to city council, which just becomes a big arbitrary quagmire. And, depending on who sits on council, it's better to kind of codify this and create this document. So, but how do we know how many points are required? I mean, I would really want to push, because we're saying it's because hotels are the economic sector that work right now in Asheville. And therefore they're kind of, invasive. So that's why they're taking over. And so what we're trying to do is throttle that down and say high quality development, that offers something more than just a canned hotel. So do we have our points high enough?
I think we have a good working draft. We're trying to balance that comment from the comments we're getting from developers and hoteliers, understanding that many Ashevilleans don't want to see any more hotels. But let's just take an example here. So most hotels have been coming in at over 100 rooms. So we can assume 81 plus rooms for most hotels. So in these urban districts, CBD, Biltmore Village, and RAD, you need 180 points. So one way to get that in this simple chart would be to do a LEED silver building, 100 points, and then you need another 80 points, and you could get that, say, by providing living wages. So the question at that point is, does the provision of LEED silver and living wages meet an onerous enough challenge, right? Big enough cost? And it seems from our conversations and that it is a big cost. That LEED silver can be, depending on your building, upwards of $1 million. And living wages is an ongoing operating cost, right? That you're going to have to pay for many years, not just up front. So, sorry, you're about to say something.
I think it'd be really interesting if you combined a couple of these, like when you go back and talk to the public these next couple of months, what if you gave some examples where you said this building has reached this, giving this, and just see what people's feedback is. I'd be really curious.
Can you say some more? What do you mean by giving examples?
Like when you go talk to the public, say Hotel A is going to be a LEED silver in this location. It's going to have living wages. Hotel B is going to provide this much money to affordable housing and going to provide bus passes. You know what I'm saying? Could you put together a few examples and show how they get there, and then see kind of the feedback you get? Like,
we could definitely put that together. And Vidil, I don't know if you have the examples to show it, like the Flatiron or Eris. Just we also wanted to assess some of the existing hotels that were approved to see if they would have been approved or not.
I don't have those in this chart, and I can integrate those into this most recent chart. I mean, I think the concern, or what I hear a lot or think about, is many times it seems that people are asking for something without understanding what its cost is.
Agreed.
Right? They think that, say, having a green building is really a simple and easy thing. But if we look at how much, say, recent hotels have decided to contribute to the Housing Trust Fund, say several $100,000, and then you look at, becoming LEED certified and spending $500,000 to $1 million, it may even beg the question: can we even ask for more than that? But that in itself won't get them enough points to streamline approval. So that would just be the concern: is what the public expresses and what they think is acceptable sometimes is not connected to the real costs.
And I would add that we did meet. We had a focus group with hoteliers and with their architects as well, and we really tried to tailor this to make it something that is feasible for most hoteliers. We heard from some of the hoteliers that they thought that, especially some of the local hoteliers, it would be a lot harder for them to meet a higher level of points, and that what we would really be doing is, kind of opening the door for bigger corporate developers to come in as opposed to local hoteliers. We also heard that we would be, we might be pushing folks out to the county and that kind of thing, and we're trying to avoid that. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we are getting the maximum amount of public benefits that we think that we can. So that's where we landed. We feel like we've met that. We did run, like Vidila was saying, he doesn't have it on this spreadsheet, but we did do an analysis of some of the previous projects to see where they would land. And my recollection is that they would have, I think 5 of the previous, maybe in the past 3 years, they would have been able to meet this table, and it would have been a little bit higher than what they provided, but not by very much. So we felt like we were, we are pretty close to what the market could bear, so to speak, but also that the community is getting the maximum benefit that we could expect.
I think, one of the questions we ask is what does success look like in the future when applying this point system? And in zoning, you try to avoid having a lot of variances as a goal, typically, right? So, if 5 out of 10 hotels can't meet this 50%, is that what we want to strive for, or do we want to strive for that 8 out of 10 hotels can meet the points and only a few can't, and those are the ones that go to council? Or do we want only 3 out of 10 hotels to be able to meet this, and then a majority are going to council? So it is just trying to strike this balance about what is acceptable, and how many of these projects do we anticipate going to council. But I think if we can prepare a couple of examples, like you suggested, Laura, of showing some samples of a mixture of these points and articulating that to the public could be helpful in this conversation.
I wonder if, and this would be interesting to see what further community comments you get about this. I absolutely think it's great to have all the LEED and the green globes in there. It would be wonderful to see every hotel doing at least the LEED silver. But I wonder, and it makes a huge difference, obviously, energy and water and everything. But does the community perceive that as much as, and Vidila, if you can scroll down to the community benefits, like a public park or sidewalks, or is there, do we want to say that you have to get 20 points from some community benefit? I'm sure you guys thought about that, but is that the sugar that helps the 5 hotels that are able to go through by right with this? Does that help them with the community? Does it make it a little bit better? You see what I'm getting at?
Requiring community points. Yeah.
But then yeah, it begs the question, why are we just looking at tourism then? Why wouldn't we be asking some of these same things of any development coming into downtown?
Absolutely.
And I know some people think that hotels are parasitic, and there's a reason why we're picking on them. But at the same time, I mean, there has to be, I think you should require some of these benefits in the sense, or any new development, if you want to be really fair.
I would agree. Maybe this is 5 years from now, whatever other planning and zoning people are looking at it like this for, I don't know, whatever, something else on Tunnel Road, or
right.
Who knows?
If this is approved and we come back a year from now and we feel like it's working well, or we have to make tweaks to it, it certainly was a goal of ours while developing this, that it could also be applied to other land uses, perhaps in the future.
Something like a dynamic code.
Right. We clearly have to look at the points and how it works for other uses, because we know that hotels are quite profitable, so we wouldn't be able to apply the same point system to, I don't know, some other a large residential apartment building necessarily.
I think it's also important to recognize that there's going to be a constituency that opposes tourism as a matter of principle. I think that they consider that hotels now are a proxy for larger political concerns. The things that wealth inequality, social justice, and the lack of funding that they see in all kinds of realms in their lives, public transit, education, you name it. And so hotel development has essentially come to represent this economic prosperity in which some are not invited to participate. And until, some of these larger social concerns are addressed, I think we'll continue to see resistance to these projects. And I guess these are my last sentiments you'll ever hear from me on this topic. So, but it's like there is this community sentiment that private development, it has focused so much on tourism that all the other developments given short shrift. And there's, very little directed toward affordable housing. And so I don't think we can remedy this in the narrow confines of zoning. These are much broader issues that need to be concurrently considered through other departments looking at economic development and affordable housing, and why tourism seems to be the only economic sector that makes sense in Asheville. So I don't know. I guess just understanding that there will be pushback, that this is not going to make everybody happy, but that I do think it's important to put it into some sort of framework so that it just doesn't become this big biased, arbitrary mess.
Understood. And I guess the other thing that we were shooting for is we are trying to use it to implement other city council goals. I mean, that was a specific purpose. So that's partly also why the emphasis on sustainability.
Getting back to Todd's point, if, 5 out of 10 hotels were LEED Silver and had living wages, that's a lot better than what we're getting right now. Would I like to see more? Yes, but that's a heck of a lot better than now.
Absolutely. So keep at it.
All right. Well, thank you. Let's we could move on and talk a little bit about the design review. Let me just real quick kind of just look at my notes here to get me back on track. So we want to, again, remember we're trying to combine the downtown and riverfront design review subcommittees to create a new Asheville Design Review Board. And again, these were recommendations from ULI, also recommendations in our Living Asheville Comprehensive Plan. And one of the benefits that the staff sees of formalizing the design review process is to have a board that would then be able to to not only refine their process, but also to help develop better, more clear guidelines. That's definitely something that we've heard from both the Downtown Commission and the River Redevelopment Commission. So that was a goal of ours. There is a little bit of reluctance, I think, on their part to turn that over to a different design review board until those guidelines are developed. But in our thinking, that is a way to help to get to those better guidelines. So just wanted to emphasize that. And so the amendments that we have are proposing as far as the membership, and this is based really on, again, comments from the commissions, is that instead of just having a majority of the members with the demonstrated special interest experience or training, that we actually require all members to have that. So that would be demonstrated special interest or experience in architecture, historic preservation, building construction, landscape architecture, urban planning, or other related field. And then we also had added to make sure that there would be an appointee from the Downtown Commission and the River Arts Commission on each, or at least one qualified member to serve on this new design review board if possible. And that preference, we added, because there was a concern that we heard that if we require all members to have, especially if they just had training or experience, but we also allow them to have a special interest, which could be demonstrated by their application process. But we also wanted to try to make sure that we're covering all sort of other areas of interest. So what we've added is this piece that says that preference will be given to applicants who represent at least one of these special areas of interest, which would be persons with disabilities, transit users, and seniors. And we chose those because we felt that those would still reflect design-related issues with those projects, but that those other interests would also be represented, and that would bring more equity to the process. So I don't know if we want to talk about that a little bit more.
Can I ask, what is the exact, I mean, it sounds like, what is the goal of the design review? I mean, because design itself is very specific when you're talking about architecture, but you can also think of design as placemaking, public benefit, you know, I mean, it's like, so I guess, how are you guys looking at defining what the review encompasses?
Placemaking is important, and that is, and I think, you know, right now, because, you know, our downtown, we do have form codes in our downtown, and I think that those form codes sort of, while they don't have extra guidelines that deal with placemaking, they are unique to that area, for example, and the same with the River Arts District, right? With like the thought process that went into developing those form codes took into account what the existing character of that area was. So I think that, but I think you're right. I think that could be part of the process that maybe a new design review board would go through when they are developing new guidelines, is taking that into consideration. But we really are just trying to elevate design and even to bring more focus on the importance of having good guidelines, so that we could maybe get funding, pursue grant funding and things like that for those. Because right now, I think both of the commissions feel that their design guidelines are not up to what they should be. So that's a big
You mean the insert photo here?
At the very least, right? So, and I think the other thing is because we are proposing for this to be by right and staff level review, is to make sure that our process is more formalized, and that we're referencing back to the guidelines and decision making, that it's not just whims of a commissioner and that kind of thing. So which we have some of that over the years. So those are,
would you like me to share?
make the process more efficient as well. If we feel like if we could have one staff person working with this commission, that we can just continue to improve the process. Right now with the subcommittees, it's working, and I know if they're watching, they're gonna, I'm not trying to criticize that process, but I think that we're charged with trying to improve the process, and we feel like this is a step in that direction.
Stacy, do you want to share your screen on this presentation, or I can share?
No, it's
mine?
okay. I'm good. I didn't real. I don't have anything. I have a few other slides, but I don't think we need to.
I just wanted to mention too another goal. I'm not sure if you mentioned this, Stacy, or not, but we obviously have this mandatory review, voluntary compliance system for design guidelines, and we have what we're calling, and this is kind of semantics now, but development standards codified in the UDO, and those are the standards that you have to follow. They're very objective. But we also have a separate set of design guidelines in the downtown and in the riverfront area. We also, as part of this proposal, have new design guidelines solely for hotels that would not be codified in the UDO, but they're more subjective. And when you have those subjective guidelines, staff feels that a design review body is the best platform to make a decision about those more subjective types of guidelines that staff can't make because it's not objective criteria. I don't know if you could show any examples or speak to that, Stacy, but the system that we're recommending with a new design review body gets us closer to a mandatory compliance type of design review system. Because if a project has to meet the development standards, has to meet the point threshold in our public benefits table, and has to get a positive recommendation from the design review body in order to be reviewed or adopted or approved at a staff level. So we're almost incentivizing mandatory compliance with the design guidelines.
So I did just one example that I had was, for example, the building height. In the code itself, it says that the height of all new buildings shall be established by the underlying zoning district. And then we talked about, but may not exceed 100 feet. But the guideline is that the height of structures should be appropriate for the neighborhood and not eclipse or compete with distant views and or historic structures. So that just gives you an example of the difference between a very specific code requirement and something that's a little bit more.
Yeah, and I mean, the idea that a building can't compete with a historic structure, I couldn't support that. Why can't a new building be exciting? Why does it have to become a kind of background diluted building, that just fades in with everything else? I mean, that to me is a real missed opportunity to kind of just keep our city creative and moving forward. I could send you probably, 50 images of amazing designs that probably wouldn't meet the design standards. So how do you allow for, that's I'll send everybody an article. I sent one to Stacy earlier. Just talking about how like well-intentioned design review boards can end up like an insecticide, killing the good and the bad.
So I do want to clarify that particular guideline that I'm referenced would actually only apply in the suburban areas, and it may be irrelevant. And that another thing that we would actually want the new design review board to do would be to work on the guidelines. So maybe there might be a time period. I was thinking about this today. If this were to pass and we form this board, maybe there would be an interim time period where we use these guidelines, but the objective would be to really develop, have the design review board be part of the process to develop. And I think, Laura, you sent the GSA review, those would be things that we would consider and have them help to develop the process. Right. That would be the intention. So.
Okay. And then what is the thinking about combining the two boards? Because I think some people might argue that downtown and river are so distinctly different. So is it better to have two design review boards or the one?
Well, in staff's opinion, it's better to have one. And we would have different guidelines certainly for those two areas so that we would recognize the distinctiveness of those, the character of those two areas. But the board could be the same board to review that. an example would be like in our historic districts where we have 4 different local historic districts and we have different guidelines for each of those. So I think, a designer or someone with the experience in that process could easily use a different set of guidelines to review projects. But we do think it would be more efficient and be better overall to have one board.
So yeah, in other words, the underlying expertise in design is you either have it or don't, and you apply that knowledge just to different character areas in the city. But that the expertise is still there.
Todd, I mean, and Laura, I mean, design is design. If you know design, the same principles apply. And so with these guidelines in place, as you have, as we're dealing with this, I think then the board, the design review board could really just deal with, with design, which we've been trying to do for a long time and haven't been able to. So whether it's, a sense of place or whatever it is that we've built into these requirements, design is still design. And if you're going to have some disagreements, but I still think the design principles will apply. Hopefully, if we set that bar high enough and we get the right people, then it's at least going someplace we haven't gone yet, and it's worth a try. And this is, I hope it's going to be a dynamic process. So as we get into it and do a couple of these projects and look at them, and especially since it's based on just hotels, so it kind of limits where we are. And I think we're going in the right direction here. So
is this just for hotels, or does this take over as a design review? I guess I'm confused.
Well,
please identify. Yeah.
Yes, so it would actually be for all design review.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's even better.
Yeah. But you're absolutely right that it would be an evolutionary process. I mean, certainly it would be a first step, and then we would hope to continue to refine it. And on the flip side of what you said about focusing on design, what we're also looking at is that we would like for those other commissions to focus on the economic development issues and have, more focus on those issues for those boards.
And that's a different set of expertise that you would want.
Right.
That would free for those boards to look at those issues where design is such a specialized set of abilities that I welcome that ability to talk about design in a very contextual basis.
Right. And again, because we are requiring approval of this board as part of the process, we feel like it's even more important. Because, as Todd mentioned, it's it's not mandatory compliance. There's still an out, but it's a way that under North Carolina state law that we can more or less require compliance with the recommendations of the design review board.
Thank you.
And I think, I'm sorry, Laura, go ahead.
Well, just consider kind of building a little on what Guillermo's talking about, though. Design is more than just taste, it's and aesthetic preference. It's about problem solving and looking at a puzzle and identifying constraints and working within them. So I think there has to be some emphasis on that, not just on, because everybody has their own taste, and you can't create those kinds of guidelines. And so I would just encourage you to consider how design plays in, how we, because he is referencing design school. You are taught to look at things very, as a problem solver.
Yes, I agree. So,
and Laura, I was just going to say, I agree wholeheartedly that any design guidelines should not stymie creativity, and that's that's part of what's nice about having the flexibility of, I guess, the mandatory review, but voluntary compliance allows projects to be more creative by not following a very rigid standard for all design. And
you get some duds.
Yeah, and we could definitely, I think we should definitely review the draft design guidelines that we have and make sure that creativity in design is not stymied by those guidelines. And Stacey, I don't know if you had an opportunity yet to talk a little bit about some of the feedback we received from boards and commissions about this design review process as well that you could share.
I've kind of woven that in as we've been talking, but basically the biggest concern is about the guidelines that both the downtown commission actually they wanted just to continue. They continued their decision. Well, they voted to not recommend the two boards to be combined, but mainly because they wanted more time for the council to be able to look at the whole proposal. And now we do have that additional time, but also to look at the design guidelines. So, but I guess, and the same thing with the River Arts Commission, the first time we met with them, they seemed pretty supportive of the whole idea, but they wanted to make sure that it was all designers on the board. When we met with them again, they kind of stepped back a little bit, and some of them had concerns about forming the joint committee. But most of the concerns went back to not having good guidelines to begin with. And and the staff agrees with that. But what we're proposing is creating this board to help to elevate design, and so we can work more on those guidelines. So with that new board, and I know, and I mean, and it would be, I don't know, I guess in my mind, it just seems like it would be a lot more efficient and a better system if we had a design review board formed and then work with them to do that, as opposed to having it broken out into the two. And with the subcommittees are working pretty well, but then there are only a small group of designers, right? There's only like designers like that, where if we had a bigger group of designers working together, and then that's where we're headed with our thinking on that.
My last question is there any way you could make your design guides somewhat dynamic, like you're making the matrix? Because no set of guidelines is a one size fits all for every project, every type of use. Is there a way to kind of, if then therefore, kind of play around a little bit with the guidelines to give you some flexibility?
Yeah, I think so, but I want to emphasize too that right now the design guidelines, downtown does have their own guidelines, and under this proposal, those would still be at least right away. Like if this happened tomorrow, it would be those existing downtown guidelines that would be used for hotels. So the guidelines that are a part of your package, those only apply in the areas outside of where there is existing form codes or design guidelines. So like in Biltmore Village, the historic guidelines are still going to apply. In downtown, those guidelines would apply. And in the River Arts District, they do have guidelines that they're using now for design review, and those would still apply. So this sort of like one sheet of guidelines that we put together in addition to the standards would be for the suburban hotels. So we kind of focus, so some of that was focused on thinking on those lines.
Right.
I think the answer to your question is, yeah, I mean, as far as flexibility, to me, guidelines have flexibility. Like that's what distinguishes them from standards. So one example, and I mean this for like just in general design guidelines, flexibility. Every building must have a base, a middle, and a cap. I disagree. I'll show you a lot of buildings that don't have a base, a middle, and a cap. So that is very specific. And is there a way to say, or you could just, could you give a menu? Yeah,
and Stacey, I could answer this one. I think too for the downtown design guidelines, there are some that have options, not all of them. And I think when we have the opportunity to revisit the downtown design guidelines and the riverfront design guidelines, we should definitely look at making changes based on what we know that it's been around for 10 years now in the downtown. And I think there's definitely some tweaking that needs to happen for both downtown and the riverfront. But there are some examples of downtown design guidelines that do provide options or sort of a menu of options. And I think that's something that we could definitely add at some point to strengthen our design guidelines across the board.
Great.
Okay, that's really pretty much what I had prepared to discuss with you all. So unless you have any other specific questions.
I just want to, I think staff has done a really great job of pulling this together. It's a difficult process, but thank goodness you're doing it because we really need it.
If you guys want to think about it a little bit more, so we do have another conversation or another opportunity to continue the conversation at the next meeting. So if there's something in particular you would like to discuss, maybe shoot us an email so that we can be sure to prepare. I mean, nobody's asked about going through the ordinance. I don't need to go through the ordinance. But if there's any interest in some parts of that, we can look at that too as one example. But whatever you guys think.
I think until we get more direction from council, we're just kind of working from a wish list.
Right. So after the work session on the 13th, we'll definitely have a more clear picture. And then we'll come back to you following that with, with the very specific amendments that we may make based on the things that we discussed tonight, as well as any feedback that we get from them.
And we'll be certain to also share feedback that you provided this evening with council at the work session as well. We definitely want to be able to share all the feedback we've received to date from our boards and commissions.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for your attention. Yes. Thank you.
And thank you, Laura, for leading us. You have been an inspiration. I know to me, I've learned so much from
Your
you.
meetings will be a lot shorter when I'm not,
I don't know about that, but you have been an inspiration. Yeah, I've learned a lot from you, and I think we share very similar desires to up the ante in terms of really good, appropriate design for the city. And thank you for your time. And I hope to see you before us in the future with exciting new projects.
Oh, count on it. Can't wait. Thanks, everybody. It's been an immense pleasure. So the next group, I hope you guys, tackle these issues and have fun doing so. And I'll tune in and I'll come watch you one day when we're allowed back in the building.
Hopefully we'll see you presenting in front of the new P&Z commission at some point in the near future.
Working on it. Absolutely.
But also just on behalf of the city too, it's difficult as it is to volunteer for any board or commission, and I give anyone who wants to do that just a great deal of respect. And it's a tremendous contribution to the city. To chair a board or a commission just compounds the difficulty. And we just want to send our appreciation to you. And you've done a fantastic job chairing this commission.
Thank you.
And definitely be sad to see you go.
So, all right, well.
Thanks, Laura.
All right, everybody. I'm gonna cry. Okay, with that being said, this is my last time to say the next meeting will be at 5 p.m. on October 7th. And is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second, yes. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, we're adjourned, and I will see you guys soon. Take care.
Laura.
Good night.
Bye.